Again, the only physiotherapy school in Tanzania. We were linked with the school, and they came along to us and they said, we want to develop a degree course in physiotherapy. And I thought, well, how on earth do you do that? And as Brenda said this morning, my next door neighbour happened to be the head of physiotherapy at Northumbria University. So I got Jan involved, and we actually brought a couple of people over to do master's projects in the UK for a year to get the training so they could be the lecturers. And then we helped them develop the physiotherapy curriculum. But you can't develop a degree curriculum without involving people like the Ministry of Health, because there's no point employing people if there isn't going to be a job for them to go to at the end of it. So they were involved, and actually we've developed these graduates who are now heads of physiotherapy departments within Tanzania. So that's Jan here, when they had their first degree ceremony. From the original tissue viability link, we then worked out, backtracking through the system, where's the infections first come from, and a lot of these were on the surgical wards, and a lot of it was to do with what was happening at surgery, and so we were then looking at how we could actually help further back within the system to prevent these wounds getting infected in the first place. And again, we've run these courses and have continued to run those courses with KCMC. This is an example of how you can work together with other links. Oxford have a link with KCMC, and that's fine because there's plenty of work to go around. They actually had someone from theatres, so they worked with us. So it wasn't us competing with them, but actually how can we work together? And that's really, really important, not just with other links, but with other NGOs. When you first start off, find out what other people are doing, because there's no point doing the same thing or not working together. And this is Lillian, who, and actually it was quite useful because Lillian's very old school. I don't think she'd mind me saying that. But actually that worked really, really well because she was familiar with the systems that they were using. And then thinking about equipment, we had a whole lot of endoscopy equipment. We were no longer going to be using it because they'd invested in some new kit, which was all fancy and everything else. But our old kit was perfectly usable. So we managed to ship it out and actually develop set up the first endoscopy unit in northern Tanzania with our equipment. And I've been talking to people today about this issue of donating equipment and how important it is that people have got to be able to maintain that equipment. And it actually has worked for many years. It's getting to the end of its life now. But it enabled them to start off. And this is a picture of a couple of years of medical students. And this is one of the medical students over there because they developed a medical school at KCMC back in about 2000. Again, we helped a little bit with the curriculum development for that school. Then one of the students said, can I come over for my elective? Now, we're all familiar with our students going off to Africa for the elective, but actually this was to go the other way around. And now we've just had 4 students this year. They come over for 2 months to Northumbria. We've had over 30 students over the last 7 years who've actually come and spent their electives with us. And it's just as different for them coming here as for our students going there, so that they learn different ways of teaching. So the idea that we bring in patients to tell students about what it's like living with their condition, that's totally new for them. But they also learn about different conditions that they're not familiar with in Tanzania. But our students will learn from it as well when they're over. So we get them involved with the same teaching that our students do. And most of these students have kind of kept in touch with me over the years to see what they're doing. And this was just a thought that came to me last week, that the Junior Doctor of the Year came up to talk at our electives prizes evening, and he was involved with the King's link with Somaliland, that you've all heard a lot about. And they've got a fantastic link up between the medical students at King's and the medical students in Somaliland. And I think this is a really good example of how, actually, do you know what, that's a really good idea. Why don't we get our students to link up with the students in Tanzania? And so that's something that we're certainly going to look into and learn from King's as to how we can do that. Because the internet makes such a difference these days. There's so many things that are possible. And so just currently, again, Brenda mentioned this morning, but ultrasound. So you're not allowed to have a baby in the UK without having ultrasound. if you get pregnant in Africa, and I know there's a lot of midwives in the audience here, you've got to be near a place that has an ultrasound machine, and there's not many places that have those. That an ultrasound machine that's working, there's someone who knows how to use it, and there's electricity, etc. But actually, what's fantastic in the last few years is that portable ultrasound machines are now available. They're relatively cheap, they're relatively easy to maintain, and there's no reason why you can't actually go in an ultrasound in someone's hut or whatever. So it's actually now looking at how we can take this out to the villages, and probably, training people like the midwives and other people who we know are going to stay, not just the doctors who are going to move on somewhere else. And this is Jesus and Pat. You've already seen a picture of them. And this is the sort of area. So you're miles and miles away from somewhere where you can have your ultrasound. So let's go out and take it to the local health centres. And this is people queuing up when they heard the ultrasound machine was coming. And this was fantastic. I was there at this time, and this is Penda, who's the obstetrician. And this lady was well on in her pregnancy, but actually, she then had this ultrasound. You know what? She's having twins. And I'm actually a twin, and my mother didn't know till well on in her pregnancy that she was having two of us. And of course, that's what it used to be in the old days. But out here, she was unable to think, oh, I'm going to have two, so I've got to start planning for that, and was unaware of it before that. And then it's all very well thinking, well, that must be a good idea, we'll do it. But you've actually got to then work out, well, actually, are the locals going to accept that? So I had a medical student who was intercalating for a year from Leeds, who actually came and said she wanted a project. So she actually interviewed a lot of the women involved with this thing to find out, A, would they accept having jelly put on their tummy and an ultrasound, and B, if they found out that their expected date of delivery was whatever, would that influence what they would do afterwards? Because there's no point putting in technology unless the local people are going to use it. And then this is the other link that I think probably that gets a lot talked about with our link. And this is Liam Horgan, who's one of our laparoscopic surgeons, doing some laparoscopic surgery or training laparoscopic surgery out there. And when we first mooted this idea of doing laparoscopic surgery in Africa, people said, well, that's ridiculous. Why do laparoscopic surgery in Africa? They've got lots of other problems. But actually, again, goes back to that business of all these people festering on the wards because they've got infected open wounds. And actually, if you do laparoscopic surgery, you can get them in and out really quickly, much smaller wounds, and they don't get infected, and they walk out the theatre, or they walk out the hospital the next day or whatever. So you can really turn people around a lot quicker. And again, the surgeons out there have now become the trainers for the places in East Africa, and this is a training thing that they use for the laparoscopic surgery. And what we can do now is our surgeon can be sat in front of a screen in Hexham, near Newcastle, and real time, and this is thanks to the World Cup in South Africa. The reason it's thanks to the World Cup in South Africa is they put a fibre optic link from East Africa to South Africa, so we now have fibre optic all the way from East Africa to the UK. So real time, they can actually supervise someone doing an operation in Tanzania. Say left a bit, right a bit, all that clever surgeon type stuff. So it's fantastic. So if we can do it for surgery, it opens up huge possibilities for other things that you could potentially do with the internet and with internet links. And then final project is that we're just starting off on is this Burns project. And this is an example of you haven't got the expertise, go and find it somewhere else. We don't have a Burns unit, but hey-ho, Pinderfields down in Yorkshire do, and they're dead keen to collaborate. So we're collaborating with them to help set up a Burns unit at KCMC. It's a huge problem, and all of you will be familiar with these road traffic accidents, people falling in fires, etc., etc. And so burns are a huge problem in Africa, and they need the right treatment. I'm not going to dwell long on this slide because I preached the converted here, and it's all been said today. But there are so many things that people can get out of these links. So I'm sure you've all had lots of things you can write on those cards that were given out. But one of the most important things is having someone at the far end who is enthusiastic as well and who you can rely on. And this guy is Mark Swye. He was Director of Hospital Services until he retired recently. And he has been fantastic. And he's always a reliable person to make sure that things happen. And he's been over to the UK. He's a very good speaker. He's spoken at local events for us. And he's a very good ambassador for KCMC. And has been very important. as we heard this morning, it's not all roses, and there are lots of problems. And I think, you know, short-term problems and, you know, how you can make an impact on that thing. And this thing that what I prefer to call the loose cannon. You can spend years developing a relationship with people, developing trust and everything else, and you get one person who goes out and says, oh, well, this isn't the way we do it in the UK, you should be doing this, this is ridiculous, you know, you're all familiar with these people. So you've got to be really careful who you pick to go on links, so they understand the local situation and then work with the locals, rather than going in with this rather colonial attitude. But, you know, I think we're much better at picking those people up. I don't need to talk to that slide. You're all familiar with it. You send an email, and why haven't they replied? And why haven't they replied? And, you know, but when you get there, just somehow it all seems to work out. And we've heard that again and again. It'll be all right on the night is just so true. What's changed? Well, the internet I've already referred to. Communication via the internet. Mobile phones. When I first went to Tanzania, I had no way of communicating with the outside world. It just didn't happen. There were no landlines, nothing. You know, for weeks on end, I couldn't communicate with the UK. It was all by post. And mobile phones have transformed Africa in an even greater way than mobile phones have made an impact here. And so really, and the media has made a big difference. So suddenly people can be aware of this. So I'll give you a picture of Cheryl Cole, because she's a Geordie. Now, because she's a Geordie, and because she climbed Kilimanjaro with Chris Moyles or whatever, you'd think that would be a really good chance for us to raise our profile, because here we are, she comes from Wales End, she lives locally, and we've got a link with the hospital. But unfortunately, we weren't able to capitalise on that. So there was no publicity for KCMC came out of that. But this project I'm going to tell you about now would not have been possible without the link and without mobile phones. So I'd looked at how common stroke was, but actually what you really want to know is how frequently it occurs. So what we did for this project was we looked in the two centres in Africa, two areas that we had information on, and whenever someone had a stroke, someone from the village would text on their mobile phone to the study coordinator. You couldn't have done this study 10, 15 years ago. That person would see them. If they'd had a stroke, we would take them to hospital, to KCMC. There were two places in Tanzania at that time where you get a CT scan. One was Dar, one was KCMC. So we could actually CT scan these people. Remember the problems with Tenerife before that. And then we could also follow them up. And so that, in theory, that was great. We're ready to go. So I went out to Dar es Salaam, and the first meeting I had in Dar es Salaam was, people were saying, well, that's all very well, but if you have a stroke in Africa, you don't go to hospital. So remembering back to my first ideas in Gambia, are we really seeing everyone? And people don't go to Africa because stroke is not a medical problem. They go to the traditional healer. Why would you go to the hospital? And this is the sort of quotes that we would get from the stroke patients. So I thought, so even before we started, I thought this project is not going to work, except we turned it to our advantage. So we actually recruited a Tanzanian PhD student who did a whole project on health beliefs around stroke. And we came to an arrangement whereby they could go to a traditional healer, but we needed to know about them.